My fiancée said she needed to focus on work. Then I saw her holding hands with her boss. It started quietly, almost too quietly to notice. A few unread messages, some late replies, a canceled date that she promised to make up for. She said work had become overwhelming since her promotion, and I believed her. I even told my friends how proud I was of her dedication, how lucky I felt to be with someone so ambitious. At first, I didn't question the long hours or the exhaustion in her voice. I told myself that love required patience, that this was what support looked like. But slowly, the rhythm of our relationship began to slip out of sync. The morning calls became shorter, the evening ones less frequent. She no longer laughed the same way, no longer shared the random stories from her day. Our Sunday routines, the breakfast at the corner cafe, the long walks through the park, the lazy afternoons watching movies, disappeared without warning. She always had a reason. A project to finish, a deadline to meet, a meeting to prepare for. Each reason felt valid on its own, but together they formed a wall I couldn't see past. When I did see her, she was different. Her clothes looked sharper, her makeup more deliberate. She had a new perfume, one I didn't recognize. When I asked, she said it was a gift from the office. I tried to smile, to pretend it didn't sting, but something about it felt wrong. There was a scent of someone else's world clinging to her, a life that no longer included me. Still, I convinced myself I was imagining things. I told myself she was tired, that I needed to give her time and trust. Weeks passed, and she grew distant in ways that were impossible to explain. She started taking her phone everywhere, even to the bathroom. She would step outside for calls that she said were from clients. Sometimes she'd come home late and head straight to bed, claiming she was too exhausted to talk. I would stay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering when she had stopped reaching for my hand under the sheets. The silence between us wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy, filled with questions that neither of us wanted to ask. I tried to bring us back. I planned a weekend getaway, thinking maybe a change of scenery would help. She smiled faintly and said it wasn't a good time. Work was demanding her full attention, she explained. She said she needed to focus on her career for a while, that it would help us in the long run. Her words sounded reasonable, but her eyes looked somewhere else. I wanted to believe her, so I did. I told myself that strong relationships survive distance. I told myself that she loved me, even if she didn't show it the same way. Then came the night she mentioned needing space. We were sitting in the living room, the television humming quietly in the background. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't read, half sadness, half relief. She said she needed time to focus on herself, that she didn't want to lose sight of her goals. I nodded slowly, pretending I understood. In truth, I was terrified. I asked if I had done something wrong, and she said no. It wasn't about me, it was about her. That was supposed to comfort me, but it didn't. After she left that night, I sat alone in the dark, staring at the spot where she had been. Her perfume lingered in the air, that same unfamiliar scent that no longer belonged to us. I thought about how love fades not in grand explosions, but in quiet absences. It slips away in delayed replies, missed dinners, and half-hearted goodbyes. I replayed every conversation, every moment I might have missed, searching for a clue that explained why the woman I loved had become a stranger sitting across from me. Days turned into weeks, and I learned to adjust to her silence. I started eating alone, sleeping alone, existing alone. Friends told me to give her time, that stress could make people withdraw. I listened, but deep down I knew this was more than stress. It felt like she was slowly untangling herself from my life, one thread at a time. I could feel it every time she called me by my name instead of a nickname. Every time she smiled, but her eyes didn't follow. I wanted to confront her, to demand honesty, but fear held me back. Fear of confirming what my instincts already whispered. Fear of losing her completely. So I waited, clinging to the idea that maybe things would return to normal, that maybe the woman who once looked at me like I was her future would remember what we had built together. But that night, as I scrolled through my phone, I saw her latest post. A picture of a dinner table set for two, the glow of candlelight reflecting in a wine glass. The caption read, "Celebrating new beginnings." My stomach tightened. She hadn't mentioned any celebration. I wanted to believe it was just another work event, another milestone. Yet the truth settled inside me like a weight I could no longer ignore. The distance between us wasn't about work. It was about someone else stepping into the space I kept trying to hold open. Trust is a strange thing. You build it slowly, moment by moment, until it feels like the foundation of everything. But when cracks appear, they spread fast, no matter how hard you try to ignore them. I kept telling myself that she was just busy, that her new position demanded more time, that the woman I loved would never betray me. Each night, I made dinner and waited, watching the clock as the food went cold. She would text at 10, sometimes 11, saying she was still in the office or stuck in meetings that never seemed to end. I believed her because believing was easier than imagining the alternative. One Friday evening, I decided to surprise her. I left work early, stopped by her favorite bakery, and picked up a box of pastries she loved. I told myself that seeing me would make her smile, that maybe she just needed a reminder of how much I cared. When I reached her office, the lights were dim except for the soft glow coming from the reception area. The receptionist looked startled when she saw me. She smiled politely, then hesitated, glancing toward the hallway. I asked if my fiancé was still around. Her expression shifted into something uneasy. She said she had already left about 20 minutes earlier with her boss. The words hit me like a cold wind. I tried to keep my composure. I thanked her, walked out, and sat in my car for a long time, staring at the box of pastries on the passenger seat. My thoughts raced in circles. Maybe they were just grabbing dinner. Maybe they were discussing a client. Maybe she didn't tell me because it was last minute. I wanted so badly to believe any version of reality that didn't involve betrayal. I drove home slowly, each red light feeling like an interrogation. When I got back, the apartment was dark. I left the pastries on the counter and sat alone in silence. The next morning, she texted that she had crashed at a colleague's place because it was too late to drive home. She added a heart emoji at the end, as if that would make everything feel normal. I typed a reply but deleted it. There was no point. Something had changed, and pretending otherwise would only delay the truth. Later that day, as I scrolled through social media, I saw her latest post. It was a photo of a dimly lit restaurant table. 2 glasses of wine, a half-finished dessert, a folded napkin beside a silver spoon. The caption read, "Celebrating new opportunities." No tags, no faces, no explanation. I stared at that photo for a long time. The details bothered me. She had told me she was exhausted, yet there she was, dressed up and out for dinner. She had said nothing about any celebration. I checked the timestamp. It matched the time I had gone to her office. My chest tightened. I wanted to ask her about it, but every time I imagined the conversation, it ended in denial and defensiveness. Instead, I said nothing. I told myself not to overthink, that people post things all the time without hidden meanings. Still, the image burned in my mind. Over the next few weeks, her routine grew even more unpredictable. She began answering calls in another room, whispering, laughing softly at something I couldn't hear. When I asked who it was, she said it was a coworker. She started dressing differently too, more polished, more confident. The woman who once wore sneakers to the office now wore heels and lipstick that matched her new perfume. I noticed everything, yet said nothing. I kept telling myself it was part of her growth, part of her career. But deep down, I felt like an outsider watching her life from a distance. One night, she came home late again. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to watch television. She walked in, her face glowing in a way that didn't look like stress. It looked like happiness, but not the kind that came from me. She kissed me lightly on the cheek, mumbled something about a presentation, and disappeared into the shower. When I looked at her bag, I saw a receipt sticking out from the side pocket. A restaurant name I didn't recognize, 2 entrees, a bottle of wine. I folded it back carefully and placed it where it was. The next morning, she left early, saying she had an important client to meet. I waited until she was gone, then sat at the kitchen table staring at that same box of pastries, now stale. It felt symbolic somehow, a reminder of how something sweet could sit untouched until it lost its meaning. I tried to remember the last time we had eaten together, laughed together, touched without the tension of unspoken doubt. I couldn't. That evening, she called, saying she'd be home late again. Her tone was casual, like routine. I told her to take her time. When I hung up, I realized how strange it sounded, me giving her permission to drift further away. I was no longer part of her world, just the person she returned to when the day was over. I went to bed that night with a knot in my chest. The truth was forming itself, piece by piece, like a puzzle I didn't want to finish. She said she needed to focus on work. Maybe she did, but the kind of focus she had now wasn't on her career. It was on someone else. I didn't have proof yet, but I could feel it in my bones. Something was slipping away from me, and this time, I couldn't pretend not to see it. It had been 2 weeks since the night she told me she needed more time for herself. I tried to play along, to act supportive, to believe the silence between us was temporary. Every morning, I sent her a short message wishing her a good day. Most of the time she did not reply. When she did, it was short and distant, like she was responding out of obligation. I told myself she was just overwhelmed. That excuse had become my comfort, the small lie I repeated to survive. That Saturday morning, the apartment felt heavier than usual. Her side of the bed was cold, untouched. She had left early again, saying she was attending a company training. I looked around at the quiet kitchen, the empty coffee mug she used to hold, and I felt something inside me whisper that I was losing her for good. I decided to do something simple, something that might remind her of what we once were. I would buy her favorite croissant from the cafe she loved, the one where we had spent countless mornings laughing and dreaming about our future. The streets were busy with people starting their weekend. I walked with determination, clutching my phone, telling myself this gesture would fix something, even if just a little. The cafe was a few blocks away, its blue sign shining softly in the morning light. As I pushed the door open, the smell of coffee and pastries hit me, warm and familiar. For a moment, it felt like stepping back in time. Then I saw her. She was sitting by the window, the same corner where we used to sit. Her hair was tied loosely, a soft smile playing on her lips. But she was not alone. Across from her sat her boss, the man she had mentioned casually in conversation months ago. He was leaning forward, his expression relaxed and amused. They were laughing together, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. My heart thudded in my chest. I told myself it could still be innocent, that maybe they were discussing work, that maybe I had walked into a coincidence. Then I saw her reach across the table. Her hand rested on his, fingers brushing lightly before intertwining. It was not the touch of colleagues or friends. It was slow, familiar, comfortable. The same way she used to hold my hand when she wanted to calm me. The same way she used to look at me before saying she loved me. My body froze. The box in my hand slipped slightly, the paper crinkling loudly enough for the barista to glance my way. I stood there for a moment, invisible in the crowd of customers ordering coffee, watching the woman I had once planned to marry laugh like she had never known me. She leaned closer, whispering something that made him smile. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She didn't stop him. She smiled, eyes glowing in a way I hadn't seen in months. My throat tightened. I wanted to storm over, to confront her, to demand an explanation. But something stronger held me back. It was the realization that there was nothing left to fight for. The truth was already there, clear and undeniable. I turned and walked out before she could see me. The cold air outside hit my face like a slap. My hands trembled as I threw the croissant box into the nearest trash can. I walked for blocks without direction, my thoughts loud and chaotic. Images of us flashed through my mind. The first time we met, the plans we made, the promises whispered in the dark. All of it now felt staged, a script that had ended before I even noticed. When I finally reached home, I sat on the couch and stared at the empty wall. Hours passed before I realized I was still holding my phone. It vibrated once. Her name appeared on the screen. The message was short, written with the same detached tone that had become her habit. "Sorry I missed your call. Today was intense at work." I read it over and over until the words blurred. There was no call. She had not missed anything. She had simply replaced it with something else. I typed a reply slowly, each letter cutting through the silence. "Yeah, I saw." Then I pressed send. After that, the apartment felt different. The air no longer smelled like her perfume. The spaces she used to fill felt hollow, like the echo of something that once existed but could never return. I didn't cry. The sadness was too deep for tears. It was a quiet ache that settled somewhere between anger and relief. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, realizing that sometimes the truth doesn't break you all at once. It unravels you slowly, one detail at a time, until you are left with nothing but the certainty that love, once lost, never returns the same. A week passed after that day in the cafe. I did not reach out, and she did not either. The silence between us stretched like a wall, heavy and final. I spent those days replaying everything in my mind, wondering how love could crumble so quietly. Then one evening, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, she was standing there, eyes red, face pale, clutching her purse like a lifeline. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation and began to cry before she could even speak. Her words came in fragments. "It was a mistake. Nothing really happened," she said. I listened without interrupting, just watching her, realizing that even her tears felt rehearsed. She said she had been confused, that her boss had taken advantage of her loneliness, that she did not mean for things to go that far. I wanted to believe her, but the image of her hand in his would not leave my mind. She kept repeating that she loved me, that she wanted to fix things, that we could start over. I stood there, quiet, letting her speak until the room fell still. Then I reached for the small box on the table. It was the ring she had once worn with pride, the one I had spent months saving for. I held it out to her and said the only words that still mattered. "You needed space. Now you have all of it." Her tears stopped for a moment. She stared at the box like it was a stranger. I placed it in her hand and walked past her toward the bedroom. I began packing my things methodically, not because I was angry, but because I had finally accepted that it was over. She followed me down the hallway, her voice trembling, asking me to stay, to talk, to forgive. I didn't answer. The weight of her words no longer reached me. There are moments when love ends not with shouting, but with a silence so complete that it becomes freedom. That night, I left the apartment we had built together. I didn't take much, just what I needed. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind that comes when pain has burned itself out. The streets were quiet, the air cold, and for the first time in months, I felt present in my own life. I drove with no destination, only knowing that I could not return to the man who waited endlessly for someone who had already left him in every way that mattered. In the following weeks, she tried to reach me. Messages came and went unread. Calls went unanswered. Eventually, they stopped. I focused on rebuilding what she had taken from me without realizing it. My sense of peace, my direction, my self-respect. I threw myself into work, joined a gym, spent weekends visiting friends I had neglected. Each day felt a little lighter, and each memory of her lost a little power. Months later, on a quiet afternoon, I saw her face again. Not in person, but online. A photo appeared in my feed, tagged by one of her coworkers. It was a corporate retreat, a smiling group by a beach resort. There she was, standing next to her boss, his arm around her waist, both of them looking effortlessly happy. The sight did not sting the way I thought it would. I didn't feel anger, jealousy, or regret. Only clarity. Everything made sense now. The late nights, the perfume, the sudden distance. Love had not disappeared overnight. It had been replaced slowly, piece by piece, by excuses that I had mistaken for honesty. I closed the app and sat back, letting the quiet fill the room. I thought about how often people say they need space, how easy it is to hide behind that word when what they really want is freedom to choose someone else. I used to think space was a pause, a moment to breathe before coming back stronger. Now I know that sometimes space is just the distance people create when they are already gone. Since then, whenever someone says they need to focus on work, I let them. I do not argue. I do not question. I do not wait. Because I learned that when someone truly loves you, they never make you feel like a distraction. They make you part of the journey, not something to put aside. Distance is not always about time or effort. It is about who is standing in that empty space when the truth finally shows itself. And once you see it, there is no going back.